Good morning, good day, and good evening to all our attendees joining us for today's latest Data Science Central webinar. I'd like to start our event off today by thanking Actuate for sponsoring today's event. This is their second time participating in a Data Science Central webinar, and we are honored to have them sponsoring our event today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention and show our appreciation for some of our other recent sponsors, including Teradata, Tableau, Tibco, Hortonworks, Pivotal, and VoltDB, to name just a few. These past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com, and if you've not had the opportunity to view them, I would encourage you to take a look, as they do provide some very useful information. Today's webinar is entitled Turning Obstacles into Advantages, Solutions for Visual Data Mining and Predictive Analytics. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format of today's webinar. Today's event will be approximately 1 hour long. We have two panelists that I'll introduce to all of you in just a moment, and we should have about 15 minutes for a question and answer following the presentation. As always, this event is being taped and will be made available later on this afternoon on datasciencecentral.com. I would also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation. We will be reviewing them and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. My name is Tim Madison, and I'm one of the co-founders of Data Science Central, and I will be your host for today's event. I'm very pleased to introduce today's panelists, Dan Melcher and Jeff Morris of Actuate. Dan is Actuate's Internet Application Architect and brings over 27 years experience in the software industry in various roles, including project lead, web developer, senior programmer, technical sales, technical alliance manager, and Internet Application Architect. He joined Actuate in 1999 and has been responsible for providing technical assistance in pre-sale situations, technical certifications, and architecting applications. Jeff is the Vice President of Product Marketing at Actuate, and he has more than 20 years in the industry in Internet and open source technologies and application development. Prior to joining Actuate in 2003, Jeff managed product marketing and management for open source pioneers, including SendMail and Forte. Welcome to you both, and thanks for being with us today. The explosion of new data sources enables companies to gain insights that were not previously available. But with these new opportunities also come new challenges, like resource scarcity and big data integration. Companies are turning to advanced analytics and innovative new technologies to answer critical customer-centric questions faster than the competition. But resources in data scientists and Hadoop experts are simply rare. BIRT Analytics, Actuate's predictive analytics and visual data mining solution, helps business users rapidly uncover these insights and effectively build a customer-centric strategy with advanced, easy-to-use analytics. In today's webinar, we will be discussing how to create sustainable business growth by uncovering revenue-generating customer opportunities, how to leverage exploratory, descriptive, and predictive analytical and statistical techniques to drive customer-focused strategies, how to drill down into data to identify patterns and hidden relationships, profile top buyers, and accurately forecast trends and profiles and profits. And finally, how to arm users with information to make decisions without burdening the data scientists nor interrupting IT in its core competencies. So Jeff, with that, I'm going to let you take over and begin your presentation as soon as you're ready.
Thanks very much, Tim. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here with Data Science Central. The kinds of applications that Actuate typically is creating is our product lines fall into three categories. One is the delivery of information to an immense number of users. We typically use the open source BIRT product and its corresponding BIRT iHub visualization platform for delivering all of that kind of information. We capitalize on about 3 million open source developers who are already aware of how to build BIRT applications and seek to help them with their most complicated and their most mission critical kinds of deployments. We also offer our content services capability is really for the sort of the deep back office set of organizations who are dealing with archives, are dealing with statement generation. Perhaps you're a telco and you have a billing system that you're delivering to your end users or to your customers. Oftentimes you would use our content services capability to extract and turn the information that's baked into your statements into web usable information. Now, those are sort of two of our other ancillary product lines that we offer, but today we're going to end up talking about big data analytics and the visual data mining capabilities that often kick off the entire process of delivering information in either one of those cases, whether it's identifying an insight that we want to then take action upon within the organization or come up with something new, clever, et cetera, about our customers. So typically we like to first characterize the kinds of insights or the kinds of analytics that we're trying to obtain, and oftentimes they are indeed customer-centric. When we ran a survey of our customers, of actually the industry in general, about a year ago regarding big data. Overwhelmingly, the response was that the kinds of big data projects that organizations are embarking upon are geared towards better understanding their customer needs. They want to grow revenues. They want to improve and maintain the loyalty of those customers. They want to develop increasing and improve competitive advantages, or in general want to improve IT efficiency. But that seems to be taking sort of just a slight backseat to the other three objectives that we've identified here. Now, of course, as Tim just mentioned, right, there's an explosion of data sources that we now have available to ourselves, and really they offer us an immense amount of opportunity here. There's analyses that we were never able to perform before because we didn't have the vastness of data that is now available to us. I'm not going to get into the 4 V's or the 3 V's of big data. I think everyone's a little bit burned out on that. I just want to focus on really what the core drivers for these activities are. It's analyzing customer behavior is one of the big data goals. Making big data tangible or making the analysis relevant is really one of the big plays that Actuate has been focusing on. And it's not so much dealing in the world of different big data technologies. It's more in the line of identifying a particular problem you want to solve, or at least identifying a problem you have, and then start focusing and honing in on how to resolve that particular issue. That's when your big data problems really become tangible. They really become something that the organization can grasp, and that the staff itself can begin to understand and work out. So what are some of those kinds of problems? They tend to be, as I said, customer-centric or customer-focused. They could be identifying the customers that are likely to leave us, the churn problem. They could be in improved target marketing so that you're focusing the right particular products to the right audience. They could be dealing in risk or identifying fraudulent activities, things that appear to be random but actually have some kind of pattern to them, would be a means in which to identify a fraudulent activity. But let's take a look at where all of our data are kind of driving and coming from. And what we like to do right now is segment these different data sources into 3 kind of categories. There's your traditional ones at the top, your corporate-based data, whether that's coming from your ERP systems, it comes from your Salesforce.com, your Salesforce system, whatever other applications and data warehouses and environments you may have. That's the data that you're collecting or you're used to collecting. But there's 2 other really interesting data sources or data categories that are beginning to influence the way in which we perform analytics. One is the internet-based data. That's all of your opinion-based data that you might get from Twitter and Yelp and such, positive reactions, negative reactions. That's your internet click-based data of what people are doing on the internet. You're from Google Analytics, from Nielsen, from Facebook, etc. So your internet-based data gives you a whole brand new source of information, and merging that with your corporate data is kind of interesting. And likewise, what's equally as interesting is taking the data that's derived from machines and devices. So that's computers themselves are generating all kinds of different interesting information. Oftentimes, if you're dealing in a mobile device, it's the location-specific information about that user. So let's sort of consider this particular example, right? What kind of data is the data going to identify and answer for us? That corporate-based data is going to give us the basics on who we're dealing with, the basics on what happened, the transactional information, what did they buy, or whether or not we're doing this efficiently, right? What are the ratios for performance and understanding that kind of information. On the Internet, we can identify what the relationships are of different individuals. We can identify whether they're feeling positively or negatively in the sentiment space, or we can identify what their particular Internet-centric actions were. Where did they click? Where did they go? Where did they navigate? All the kinds of information you get from cookies. And finally, on the machine-based data, you can actually take some of this into context as to what is the location and where indeed were these individuals performing these actions as they were going about their activity. So consider this kind of customer insight. Is a customer tweets or tweets out and says, I just saved $50 by buying online instead of at the vendor's mall store. So perhaps this is an Internet purchase when you're standing in front of the TV display at your favorite electronics store. Well, the electronics store is kind of bummed out because they just missed out on a sale that you performed live while you're standing in front of them evaluating the television set or whatever else you were evaluating. That's a really important customer insight for the mall vendor who has just lost a customer to the Internet provider simply because they couldn't react quickly enough or strongly enough. So those kind of customer insights are the things that we want to be identifying, reacting to, and dealing with. So what are the requirements for this kind of exercise is coming up with what you might characterize as predictions or reactions or next best offer kinds of situations at really high speed upon an immense amount of data, because you don't know when these kinds of events are going to end up occurring. But there are requirements here. One, we have to capture and gather up all the data that we want to be evaluating. The next is we want a very simple interface from which to drive and evaluate the data with features like the enrichment anytime capability. You can always add to the data. You can always manipulate and change the data in order to suit your particular analytic need at that moment. Mostly, or let's say without ever writing lines of code, you might write new expressions, but you're not going to get into the coding of of creating a new predictive formula, because that's actually going to slow down your analytic process. In order to do this, we need a terrifically high-performant architecture. We need to abstract really statistically relevant operations into things that are usable by a business user. Not every business user has a degree in statistics. We need to offer forecasting and prediction kind of methods, and we need to make this repeatable over time. So how do you get there? The kinds of activities you might perform in doing so. You're going to actually load data, that you're going to gather up whatever data that you need and identify where that might come from. You'll start to explore it using the visual data discovery methods that, as I talk about, but Dan will actually demonstrate in a second. We'll enrich and extend the data so that it continues to meet our analytic goals. We'll perform analysis, segmentation. We'll profile the information to figure out what the target demographics might be or what the locations that might be affected are. We'll perform forecasts and predictions like time series outcomes. If it happens this week, given the seasonality of purchases, what might happen next week as we get closer to the holidays? We can perform predictions like next best offer or decision tree-based classification. And then ultimately we can set up campaigns, workflow, and the like within the application so that these analyses that we're performing right now become repeatable over time. So how are we going to do or execute this? Is we're going to take advantage of the BIRT Analytic functionality, which is one of these services of the BIRT iHub. And the BIRT iHub has a very clean-looking, nice common deployment platform for all of the Actuate technologies, including the visualization and communication capabilities of BIRT, the BIRT analytic functions here that we're going to discuss, as well as those content services I mentioned earlier. The user capabilities that you'll see are abilities for a user to drive through their the files that they own, deal in things like BIRT Analytics, what we're talking about today, or deal in their operational dashboards, their ad hoc reports, and the like. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of the process, and then we'll get to this will set up Dan for showing the exercises as we go through. So the first thing that in our cooking style approach is one of our favorite demonstrators likes to characterize. In the cooking style approach, we've already loaded the data into the system. And the way that we did that is through an interface that allows us to gather up data from any different data source and map that into, load it into our environment, and then perform basic enrichment upon that data or basic transformations on that data, establish the relationships between these disparate data sources that we might be using, and put that into our very, very high-speed combo columnar and in-memory style database that will indeed make the operations of performing analysis much easier downstream. But this exercise is typically performed by an IT person in setting up the data for the individual analyst, and then we can script all of this or automate all of this through workflow so that it becomes just part of the business operation as we're moving forward. So the data preparation exercise has been performed. The next step, or the basic steps that we can start to do, are things that are very, very familiar to anyone using business intelligence tools. We can take and plot the data itself in a charting structure. We can profile and view the data and see how much data we're dealing with, what the particular attributes are, and become familiar with the data as we're driving through it. We can start to create summaries and crosstabs. We can build expressions that will, if we need new calculations or new metrics or new columns, we can use an expression builder to create those different values directly. So we've got an environment in which to begin the process of analysis. Now, one of the cool things that happens is when you're performing analysis, oftentimes the kinds of analysis you want to perform, the data never fits it. And in the most basic cases, how many times has anyone created new categories in Excel because the categories that you're dealing with just don't happen to match the kind of thought process or the business model that you're dealing in for your organization? The data coming from PeopleSoft says one thing, it's categorized, it's got 30 categories, you want to distill these down to your top 10 or your top 4. Well, there's all kinds of different ways inside of BIRT Analytics to enrich and improve the data itself so that it becomes analytically relevant and appropriate. So we can do things like even out the data in different normalization capabilities, whether we want that to scale linearly across a bell curve or fit it to the mins and maximums appropriately, or simply create quarters, quartiles, or tenths, deciles, those kinds of exercises so that I have a fixed number of categories that I'm dealing with, and they can be either specifically laid out based on a filter, or you can just say evenly disperse them across the board using the enrichment tools. But that's a really cool operation to be performing because it can happen any time during the analysis. And that's really important because as you're performing your analyses, that's when you figure out, oh, gee, I need to, I really wish this data set was distributed geographically more appropriately, and create a filter that might give you your internationalized or your territorial-based analysis. Those kind of things are what normal, everyday business users do on a regular basis, and in trying to fit the data back to the business case of the business analysis they're looking to perform. Now, once they've done those kind of exercises, the next step is this visual data discovery exercise. And here, we're going to start to get into some of the really clever things that BIRT Analytics does. One of them is it can geographically lay out and disperse your data on geographic maps, so you can see where your particular target profiles happen to be, and the color coding would be the density of the color coding would give you the indicators to where the most populous or least populous kind of distributions are. You can do things like Pareto distribution. That's sort of the 80-20 rule of analysis. Where's the majority of my customers fall, and have I covered that base? How close to being fully covered am I if I segment the operation and cut it off at perhaps the 85% point. And then some of my favorites, I like the Venn diagram example, because this is a concept that we learned when we were 6 years old, is how to do sets and groupings. Now, with a Venn diagram, though, that's actually when you start to get into how to create one of these and how to create one of these on the fly. Most other products, when you create a Venn diagram, you have to know what the segments you want to be, what the attributes of the segments are before you actually construct the analysis. So if I'm building out even this 3-bubble chart, I would have to write 7 different queries for this bubble chart before I can actually even plot any of the numbers. And then when you do so, you're plotting it usually on a visualization you've constructed in PowerPoint, or you've constructed in some other visualization tool, and you just drop the numbers in. Well, that's a way to do it. It's certainly an inefficient way, because what happens in the case of you make a mistake and you don't like the 7 queries that you just wrote, well, you have to rewrite 7 queries. But in our case, if Dan happens to make a mistake in his Venn diagram, he simply makes the adjustment. All the calculations and everything happens in real time, and it just adjusts itself. So it's something that traditionally would take an hour or more to do. Here, we're going to do it in seconds. Dan's favorite feature, by contrast, is the profiling function. The profiling function is a way to detect common attributes within a data set. So perhaps he takes a segment, and then he wants to find out what makes up the majority or the attributes that make up that particular segment. What are the common attributes? The profiling tool will allow Dan to do that specific exercise and do it very, very quickly, and then he can save off those attributes or those subsegments of his primary segment to start to do additional enhancement or additional work upon it. So the profiling tool is pretty slick. Then we get into even more advanced analytics, and here's where we start to do things in the statistical world that have huge formulas behind them. But what we're doing in BIRT Analytics is abstracting and simplifying the delivery and execution of those formulae into something that is visual for the user, they can understand very quickly, and is still statistically relevant. So we use the k-means algorithm for performing clustering and classification. This is a multidimensional algorithm for, in our case, we plot it as a bubble chart, and it circulates around the different points on the chart to create a cluster, and you actually, as input, you determine how many iterations or how closely to your standard deviation are you going on any one of those distribution points. We use the Holt-Winters algorithm for time series forecasting. And the nice thing is this does include seasonality as well. So you can say, based on the data that I'm providing you, give me a forecast of what's going to happen over the next N amount of time, and do or don't include seasonality, do or don't include other parameters here. We support the association rules for market basket analysis, and oftentimes this is referred to as the milk, diapers, and beer pattern recognition. So you can detect cause and effect when 2 things occur. What's the next likely thing to occur based on the data that you happen to have? So the old example is the 7-Eleven example of when a man walks into 7-Eleven and purchases milk and purchases diaper, there's an increased likelihood that they will also purchase beer because, of course, they're babysitting that night. And finally, we'll show the decision tree predictions. This is a classification algorithm that allows us to identify, based on a current set of data, what should we be offering perhaps as a next best product to offer, or which types of users should receive which types of products. This classification algorithm, too, is iterative, and it trains itself as it goes along, so it becomes more and more informed the more data you supply it, and the more frequently you execute it. So as I've gone through given you examples of all of those different types of algorithms we support, the next thing that you want to be able to do is string these things together. And when you string them together and create your own prescriptions, here's where you would use our workflow functionality to take any one of those set analyses or functions or operations that we've performed previously and use those as inputs to the workflow vehicle. So the workflow engine will say, all right, after a data load, start performing this particular set analysis using these particular attributes to identify a segment, then perform the profiling and understand what their top 3 common attributes are, and grab those attributes, and you work through that workflow to create your particular analysis or repeat the analysis that you're trying to perform. I can also, we have a specialty capability inside the product to create campaigns, because oftentimes, because we're dealing in customer-centric activities, the campaigns themselves will give us ways in which to contact or operate upon different segments of people categories. So different types of customers, different types of prospects. The ones that are operating from the web will get treated differently than the ones I communicate with via phone, or the ones that are already engaged in a selling activity. All of those could be different segments that you could create different styles of campaigns in which to address or which to serve them most appropriately. And we even include project management capabilities like the Gantt chart, so you can see whether things are operating efficiently or whether they're not. So what I've given you is an introduction to all of the different graphical modules of the product and that are available. The top level here are sort of your basic sets of analyses, and then the bottom row are your more advanced analyses that you can perform within BIRT Analytics. Now the cleverness lies in its ability to be very, very visual, not expose any code to the end user, but give them a very visual environment in which to be performing these kinds of analyses. And as they string them together in different orders or identifying different particular segments and profiles, we can instruct them on different types of analysis to perform, which I'll explain after Dan goes through his demo. So my last piece before the demonstration is sort of the goals in which we want to be presenting the overall product. And when you look at it from its competitive standpoint, we take these different axes of data complexity, right? In creating big database solutions, I go from not very complex to really super complex, oftentimes that are built out in Hadoop or built out in other big data technologies. And the more complex you go, oftentimes the more code you have to write, which reduces your agility and oftentimes reduces the speed at which you can perform your analyses. And likewise, the analytic complexity that you can perform when you're dealing in the visual data discovery tools, they're great, but they don't do they're not terribly statistically rich. The further you get down the line of complexity in your statistical richness, you move further and further into the space of either SAS or R, where indeed you're writing code again. So there's scripting languages for experts in both the high data complexity realm as well as the high analytic complexity realm, but oftentimes there's really just not a solution that allows us to operate within this easy, performing advanced analytic techniques for everyday kinds of users, or at least trained up users, upon immense amounts of data. So some of the questions we'll pose to Dan as he starts his demonstration up is, Dan, how much data are you going to be dealing with? How quickly can you perform these operations? And how often are you worrying about the particulars of the analytic exercise or the particulars of the algorithms that you're dealing with, rather than the analytic exercise that you're trying to operate upon? So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dan Melcher to actually show us the BIRT Analytic product, and then we'll come back for some closing words.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Are you able to see my screen okay?
I can see it very well, yeah.
Yeah, it looks good.
Excellent. So just to expand on what Jeff was mentioning is what is that this is the BIRT Analytics product, and I really want to emphasize that this is really geared towards the business user. So even though that there's complex algorithms built behind it, it really is a very easy to use tool to explore and to analyze your data. And in fact, I had just read a really good article called The Elements of Statistical Learning by Jerome Friedman and a couple other authors. And I really liked it. And one of the premises of that is that whenever you try to do any kind of statistical learning or use large sets of data to figure out some solutions, you always go through two phases. One is the exploration phase, and then the second is the analytic phase. And that's pretty much what I'm going to take you through today, is that I'm going to take you through a demonstration using two data sets. One is a financial services data set, and another is a web analytics data set. And the financial services data set, as we start to look at that, we can see that there's over 53 million rows of data, about 750 million cells of information in there, and we can see the different breakdowns. But just like, besides looking at things at a higher level, we can look at things at a more detailed level too. So if we look at like the ages of our customers, we can get actually this visualization in many different graphical viewpoints. And here we can see them in descending order, or even as a histogram frequency chart that we can use to just quickly tell like where our average ages are. So like between 38 and 48. And it's very easy just to drag and drop from this left-hand side to do your exploration, and then be able to see just the different record views or the different charts within here. So I know that Jeff is a customer of our financial services data company. So Jeff, what is your occupation?
I think, well, today I'll be a shop worker. How about that? I'll fit your largest profile there.
Okay. So just one of the things that's very nice about any of these graphical representations is that they're very interactive. So as I click on the shop worker column there, in the lower left-hand side, I get a nice reusable filter that I can use later on for my analysis. And just showing that I can drag and drop that into any visualization, and it'll do that filtering for me. Which means that, like, if I want to find out, like, where all of Jeff's peers reside, in what county, I can just drag the county over, and it'll show me in descending orders. And these fields are fields so far that I've shown you, like occupation and county and age, are ones that are directly pulled from the data source and made available within BIRT Analytics. But there's other fields like age band that I'm just going to double click on that and show you the discrete values to where you can build these and have them show different ranges that are meaningful to how you do business. So here, just and these fields that you create that are more informational in terms of working with analytics, they can be used just like all the other fields in any of the visualizations to be able to show those and in any of the visualizations. Now, what I'd like to do is to start off by taking a look at some of the account information that we have. And here, just clicking on the column headers will sort, descending, ascending. And from here, I can see right off the bat that investment accounts, which are my most lucrative, are actually lagging quite a bit behind the number of checking and savings accounts. So this kind of lends ourselves to a scenario that maybe we would like to try to figure out and to come up with a solution for. Now, Jeff, I know you being a customer, do you use our banking services?
Yeah, I think I have a checking account and a savings account there.
Okay. One of the nice things here is that with BIRT Analytics, you can select more than one and group them into the different visualizations. Like in this case, I like using the Venn diagram because it shows things from a very overall viewpoint, and it's a very good starting off point for the analysis. How about any of the our loan services? Do you use those?
Probably, yeah. I think I have a mortgage there, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll group all our customers that use the loan and mortgage, and those will be our loan services. And I don't think that you have an investment account. Is that correct?
Not with this one, yeah.
Okay.
So I imagine that would be something that they would want to sell me, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually a very good way of identifying some of these cross-sell opportunities. So what we have here is the Venn diagram, and you'll notice that from banking, loan, and investment that we actually don't have any intersections. And that would be true because we're looking at things from an account level. But all our customers have accounts, and this information is all linked together. So if I drag and drop the customer perspective into it, you'll notice that in lightning speed, it just recalculated those intersections and gave me those the numbers that I need. And
so if I were a business and I wanted to change the context of this, I could say companies, and that would tell me all the companies that have those different types of accounts too, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
As opposed to writing those 7 queries all over again.
Yeah. And another thing that I really like about this is, besides the speed and being able to get to it, you're able to do it yourself without writing any code or making any requests to IT to say, can you aggregate it this way for me? As with the other visualizations that I showed you, we do have the ability to interact with this. So if we want to look at and identify those loyal customers like Jeff that have banking services and loan services but not investment services, we can just click on that intersection, and that shows up as a reusable filter right here. And I can rename that to something more intelligent, like customers without investment accounts. And then we can use that later on in our analysis. So this is we've kind of taken a look at our customers, and we've identified who we want to target. Let's take a look at the accounts and try to learn a little bit more about what's going on there. Very often, people are very used to using crosstabs, and it's a great way to aggregate information and to get and see what's meaningful. Here, I'd like to take the account age, and let's compare that account age to the different account types. And then let's actually set the let's go into advanced and measures, and actually, I'm sorry. Let's just chart that and see over time how the different account types, how long these account types have been held and where it's most. So we can see that most of our checking accounts actually happen right like within the first year of people signing up with us. So if we were going to try to increase our investment accounts numbers, then probably the best thing to do is maybe bundle some kind of deal to steer people in to investment accounts while they're doing checking, signing up for checking accounts. Now, we've kind of been looking at things from the account type, but let's take a look at things from the customer perspective. Jeff, just curious, like with our financial services company, do you mostly use credit cards or cash?
Credit card. It's the holiday season.
And how old are you?
Do I have to say? 47.
And what's your income? You don't have to tell me. What's your favorite baseball team?
The Giants.
And do you like gladiator movies?
I do like gladiator movies, yeah. I like the Lion.
Okay. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that, instead of, finding out information on every single one of your customers, you have the ability, if you have the data, to be able to do a customer profile on them and be able to find out not only what's important to them and how they're using your company, but also the strongest correlations within, like in this case, our target market, which is clients without investment accounts. And you can do that by just taking that reusable filter, dropping it into the profile feature, and then be able to just start dragging and dropping different fields from, like in this case, our customer table directly in. From there, we can see the fields. We can also see the different values. Under 30 has the highest correlation if we were only looking at age band on itself. So, Jeff, unfortunately, you're not in the strongest correlation age-wise, but what we'll do is we'll add a couple other fields in here, like whether they own a competitor's credit card, the income band, marital status, occupation, and preferred channel. And you'll probably notice that as I was dragging these in, we're looking at all the different types, the different values within those fields, and was automatically sorting them in descending order by the most, or the highest correlation that they have within this group. And from that, we can see that those with the strongest correlations have a competitor's credit card, are under 30, prefer to be contacted by email, are married professionals earning $35,000 to $50,000. Equally as important is maybe those that we should possibly stay away from, which is showing down at the bottom, but obviously equally important. But this gives us an idea of who to target and where our money probably would be best spent. Now, our financial services customers also use our website, and it seems to be the primary vehicle for interaction with us. So we actually do have a database that we got from the web team, and it's stored in a totally different database. But what we can do is we do have the ability to cross data and be able to pull data and do analysis on multiple data sources. So here we can take our filter, clients without investment accounts, and then start adding, like in this case, I'd like to show you the bubble chart because it's a nice little multidimensional way of finding relationships between different measures. And then we can take the web analytics and the number of visits and show that. And let's also add in, show how long that they've been staying on the site. So the duration visits in seconds. And there we'll take the average of that. I'm just going to go to advanced to show you that you do have control over every aspect of what displays in the visualization. So if you want the count of customers to be the bubble size, you can just put that as that third element and recalculate it. And then from that, we can see that within that clients without investment accounts, that our under 30 crowd, even though that they don't visit as often, they end up spending the most time on the website, and that'd be very valuable information. Another thing too is that like once you get these types of scenarios in place, you're not limited to just keeping them there. You can also reuse them along with other entities, like in this case, let's see how it shakes out with income band. Now, that average duration is something that's pretty important. I would think that it would be important to find out that at a customer level. Here we're looking at it from a visit level, but we actually don't, under customers, have any field that shows that. So we're not limited to, just to the data in there. I think I mentioned with you, like age band, that you do have the ability to create your own ranges, and in this case, your own fields. So what I'd like to do is show you how you can do that, and that's through the enrichment and using aggregates. So here we can take that, create a new aggregate based on that duration. Whoops, actually I take that back. We'll show that at the customer level. And then we'll call this field visit length. And we'll base it on that duration, the amount of time that they're spending on our website. And instead of a count, we'll make that an average. And we'll create that. And then that'll create it under under our customer level. So now we have that field within our customer table. And we can see here that for how many number of seconds that they stay on, that we have the aggregate, and that's all and good. But sometimes for analytics, having something this fine of gradient is too detailed. So with that, we can just go back to our enrichment and create different bands of ages. So in this case, we can take that visit length, and we'll call this visit length band. And we can say, let's just create a custom one. So that's less than 1 minute. And we'll just create the different value range categories. 3 to 10 minutes and greater than 10 minutes. Then we just need to put the upper and lower bounds in. So the upper bound of this one is going to be 60, 1 to 3 minutes, 180, 600, and a very large number. And right here, it's going to be our 60, because we're doing the duration in seconds, we need to do 60, 180, 600, and create. And then now we have that. Now we can see the counts within those and within those bands, and be able to explore that. Actually, you can check it out as different charts. And we can even filter this just on the ones that actually just those that have done views on the website, and be able to see that 56% have stayed less than a minute. And that's not that good. So I think that we can make some decisions, work with the web team to try to get that up. Now, what I've shown you so far is we've done exploration and analytics, and I'd also like to take you through just on the last thing to show you is that we do have data mining capabilities, where Jeff mentioned that all the algorithms are nicely laid out for you ahead of time. And in this case, I'm going to show you a decision tree to where you can create your own classifications, which is very nice. And in this case, we'll take our clients without an investment account and then be able to just choose the different domain columns that are interesting as to see how we want them broken down. We'll do that by age band and income band. Let's see. Yeah, let's go marital status and preferred channel, how they prefer to be contacted. And now we can create new classifiers. So I have a field here, profit decile, that I created off of the profit for each that was calculated for each customer. And on here, I'm just going to take this and filter and drag a segment in. And this is showing since these are deciles, 10%. So I'm going to take the top 40%, and I'm going to call that my high profit classification. And I'm going to, let's give that green, add that to our decision tree. And then let's conversely also show low profit. Show that as red. And let's grab those bottom 40% and drag that in. Now we can use that to train the decision tree model. And we get a nice graphical representation that shows us to where we can scroll and see our different classifications and see which ones are high profit, low profit, how they plan to be contacted, and then it really gives us a really good way to make good decisions as to where our resources and efforts should be best spent. You can also see that in a browser type format and break that out. And then also we can also tweak the model by changing the confidence levels and even dragging different types of domains in and doing a test on the decision tree model that we have. So we've really taken you on a quick tour through the exploration and analytics side, and also wrapped up with a little data mining. And I hope this was helpful to you. And I'd like to turn it back to Jeff.
Great.
Thanks very much, Dan.
Yep. Great presentation, Jeff, and loved the live demo, Dan. We have just a few minutes. We had a lot of questions come in, so I want to thank our audience for that. Jeff, do you want to quickly go through your last slide so we can get to the questions before we're...
Yeah, I just got a very quick summary on this. Thanks, Tim. Is bear in mind everything that Dan just went through, right, in doing all of these different types of analyses, whether you compare it to the big data side, the data visualization side, the predictive vendor side, is he's operating on a huge amount of data. There was 53 million records worth of data he's dealing with. He's doing things like enriching the data itself. He made those deciles. While he's performing the analysis, he's changing the data in order to suit what he's trying to do. He did do a predictive-based decision tree so that we know what we should be offering to our different customers, or the different classifications of what the next best outcome is going to be. And he did all of that without coding anything, which is fairly significant there. So, given that, right, the overall the reaction that we typically see organizations have is that's all of my data in a single place. It's easy enough for an everyday user to deal with. It's certainly something that my clicks aren't working. There we go. He found a couple of great treasures, and overall the whole experience was very, very fast. So with that, I'm going to I'll land on a last slide right here and give you a sense of the different types of analyses that you can perform. And overall, the main message we want to deliver is, boy, that was quick to do. He was burning through a lot of different capabilities here, but indeed very, very fast in finding those kinds of insights. So with that, let's take some questions, and happy to go through some of these, Tim.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jeff. I appreciate you moving it quickly so we can end close to on time. So we had a lot of questions come in. I'm going to leave this slide up, so anybody that wants to take down Jeff and Dan's information, you can contact them directly following the webinar. But we have time for a couple of quick questions here. So the first one is, does BIRT have a tool or tools to ETL the data from the multiple sources into a common database? And a part two to this is, can one ETL use the open source to do so?
The answer is yeah. The BIRT Analytics product has its own ETL functionality and sort of becomes that one database that you can draw data into. And we do have data connectors between that and the shared framework of BIRT itself. Those are in those will be released later on this year, so that data that you're drawing from BIRT can be put into BIRT Analytics for analysis, and then in turn, when the analysis is done, shared back with BIRT.
Very good. Okay. The other question is, how do visual analytics applications perform on mobile devices, and what is the best approach for visualizing mobile data stream mining results on mobiles?
Well, there's sort of two questions in there. The mobile data stream mining is one that in going through the exercises, that would be a source for the data. In terms of performing the analysis on a mobile device, often not really. Your tablet isn't probably powerful enough to be driving 53 million records worth of data, so we're not really recommending that. We tend to like to think as the mobile devices as being the delivery of the insight after it's been performed or after it's been identified. So getting it out to lots of people in the form of a dashboard or the form of some other visual, I think, is completely appropriate. But doing the kinds of analysis that Dan just performed is something that's probably best left to a good online experience, installation.
Very good. Okay. Another question is, can I review the analytic formulas embedded within the application?
Partially, but no. We're really not trying to expose the formulae themselves. If you want to do that, that's probably a better situation to go into BIRT and use some of the BIRT programming tools to perform that. In fact, Dan is one of the primary integrators of and experts within our organization of the integration with BIRT with the KNIME or KNIME products that are also Eclipse open source and use BIRT for their visualization. So we're very well versed in the programmatic approach, but BIRT Analytics itself isn't really geared for that. It's
okay.
trying to mask that for the users.
Okay, got it. So I'm going to let this be the last question for the day. Is BIRT Analytics fully, which dovetails well with what you just answered, is BIRT Analytics fully integrated with the rest of BIRT 360, dashboard, etc.?
It's getting there. It's not full enough for our liking. In the iHub 3 release that we're coming out with later on this month, it dramatically improves. iHub itself is part of the BIRT integration points. It handles users the same. It handles data access the same. It handles installation and environmental management functions the same. We are looking next year into firming up the visualization sharing, firming up the improved data integration sharing back and forth between the products, and sort of unifying the overall data structure between the different environments.
Okay, very good.
Great answers.
It's
yes, and it's getting there.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time here, so for those of you that did ask questions that weren't answered today, rest assured I will be sending all these questions to both Dan and Jeff and Actuate, and they can respond to you directly. I just have a couple of quick announcements to make. To please mark your calendars for January 7th and our next Data Science Central webinar, Visual Storytelling in the Age of Data, sponsored by Tableau Software. Also, as I mentioned earlier today, our taping will be made available later on this afternoon and can be found on the homepage of datasciencecentral.com, and it's located in the video section on the lower right-hand side of the page. This brings our webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and very thoughtful questions, and a special thank you to Actuate for sponsoring today's event, and to our panelists, both Jeff Morse and Dan Meltzer, for their insight and perspective into today's topic. My name is Tim Madison. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event. I look forward to seeing you again on January 7th. I'd also like to wish you all a happy and safe New Year. Good day.